So today, guys, we are going to make pie crust, and the pie crust that I use is from the Martha Stewart cookbook. It says collected recipes for every day. I've had this book for many years. I'm sure it is still available. And the pie crust that I'm using is found on page 4, and it's called a basic pie crust. And in French, I think it's pâté brigé. I don't know how to say it. But anyways, the ingredients for it is 2½ cups of flour, a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of granulated sugar, a ½ pound of cold unsalted butter cut into small pieces, and 1/4 to ½ cup of ice water. And that's how I put the pie crust together. It makes 2 pie crusts, but for me, I think it says 8 to 10 inch tarts or a single crust for pie, and 1 8 to 10 inch double crust pie. So I will do this recipe twice because I am going to make 2 different pies, and I like to have leftover crust so that I can cut out little leaves and things like that for Thanksgiving. So one of the things that is super important is how you measure. When you're baking, everything has to be very precise, no guessing, very precise. Now, I am not a professional baker, but I have made so many pie crusts in my lifetime. My mom was an excellent pie baker, my aunts. So I've thrown away literally hundreds, probably thousands of pie crusts that I've made over the years because of failing. This pie crust, I found, it's easy to roll, it's easy to work with, it is delicious, it's flaky, it's light, and I like it. Now, some bakers believe that all pie crusts, the dry ingredients such as your flour and your salt, should be weighed. So I'm going to do a little experimenting, and I'm going to make one crust with measurements and the other by weighing the flour and using my food scale. So just to start, I kind of want to show you here, I have 2½ cups of all-purpose flour. And when you're measuring flour, the correct way to measure the flour, let me get my little scooper. This happens to be my flour jar. The correct way is not to dip in and pull out. The correct way is to use some sort of a scooper or another cup or a spoon and actually add the flour into your cup and then just gently spread it around until you come. I usually go over the cup and then I take a butter knife and smooth it out. That way the flour isn't packed in when you're digging down. So that's one of the tips that I can give you that helped my pie crust to get nice and flaky. The second tip that I think is also very important is to have ice water. Ice water, adding it to the dough, really helps everything stay nice and cold, and that's what kind of breaks the butter down and gives it that nice crusty texture. And your butter should come right from the refrigerator, and cut it into cubes. Now, I make my pie crust with the what do you call this? It's my KitchenAid chopper. The name slips my mind right now. Talk about aging gracefully. I'm thinking of my blender, my mixer. It's my KitchenAid Cuisinart. I don't know, but this is what I use to make my pie crust. I find that it does the job just right, and I, of course, got this technique by watching it demonstrated through Martha Stewart's show. And if you want to make your pie crust in one of these, I'll stop it along the way so I can show you the texture that I'm looking for in breaking down the flour and butter and how it should come together. So I'm going to finish measuring everything out. It's pretty basic, pretty simple: flour, butter, a little bit of salt, and ice water. And that's it. So stay tuned. I have added a teaspoon of salt to the flour mix and a teaspoon of granulated sugar. Now I'm taking my 2 sticks of unsalted butter, and yep, I don't use margarine, I use unsalted butter, and I'm going to cut these into cubes. Here I have ice water, and I'm probably going to use between 4 and 5 tablespoons of this ice water, maybe 3. It just depends on how the dough comes together. Measuring spoon for the ice water. I am using the serrated blade in my, I just remembered, food processor. And I'm going to start. So I am going to kind of pulse that together. I'm going to give this flour a good mix with the salt and sugar, and I do like to add the sugar to the pie crust because I think just that ½ teaspoon just adds the right touch. I'm going to use this scooper to get my flour in here so I don't make a major mess, because y'all know I'm a messy cook, right? Now that I have the majority of it in there, put that in there. And I'm going to break this up, which is the butter. It's really nice and cold. And if you want, you can also put your bowl inside the refrigerator just to get it good and cold. So, ice water ready to go when I need it. Putting the lid on. It's going to be a little bit loud, but I'm going to go ahead and get it pulsing. Sorry, had it on, I meant to just pulse it. And that's what I want to do. I want to break down the butter into the flour. It does look like it's coursed it up some, so I'm going to start adding the water to it. Maybe just another pulse or 2. Yeah, that's perfect. And I'm going to grab a apron because I'm a messy girl. This is a cute little one, but I'll just put it right here. And I've got my measuring spoons and my ice water, and as I measure out, I don't want to make it too wet, and it's not humid or super cold. It's, you know, the right temperature in here, so I think this is going to come together pretty quickly. And as I'm pulsing, I'm adding the ice water. I'm trying not to get any ice in it, but just the water. And it is breaking it up into tiny. That's 2. This is going to be number 3. Now I'm just running it. Yep, it is going to take more. And it'll start pulling away from the bowl when it has enough water. So that was 4 that I put in there. And it is pulling away from the bowl, as you can see. I want it to come into a ball. And I don't want to over process it, but if you can see, when I put it together, it holds. And that to me is the absolute right texture. So next I'm going to lay it out onto some saran wrap fold it up, and I'm going to get it in the refrigerator, and I'm going to let it chill in there for about an hour, because then it's so nice to roll out. That way the butter hasn't melted and it will incorporate into the dough once you start rolling. So we'll be back. So here I have the dough in the food processor bowl, and I'm dumping it onto a piece of saran wrap that I've put down on my counter. Let me see if I can go down a little bit. And I am going to just dump it in here and get everything out. You can see it's in chunks, but it's not floury. It's and so what I'm going to do is I'm lifting up the saran wrap, and with the saran wrap I'm just putting it as one, rolling it up, the saran wrap that is, and then I'm going to pat it down into a nice disc. Nice round disc. Now this will make a bottom and a top crust if you need a double crust, or it will make a really generous, I have a deep pie plate that I use, and it's very generous bowl, and I like my crust to hang over and to crimp it at the top, and we like a little thicker crust, and I like to cut out little designs. So this is going to go right into the refrigerator. Simple and easy. Now the next part is the rolling. I'm getting ready to go ahead and measure out the flour. So for 1 cup of flour, it says you need to measure out between 125 and 130 grams. So I'm going to go with the 130 grams. And so I'm setting my food scale 2 grams, and it's at 0. And now I'm putting the bowl on it, which shows it's 489 grams. And I'm just going to zero it out because it makes for easier measuring. And then I'm going to scoop the flour in till I get to 130 grams. And that is equivalent to 1 cup. We're at 92 grams. Oops, went a little over to 134. I'm at 131 grams. It says it's 130. Perfect. 130. So this should be equivalent to 1 cup of flour. This is weighed flour. So of course it's going to measure differently as far as cups, but I want to make 2 different crusts, and I want to see the difference between weighing them out. So I'm going to do this 1.5 more times. So I'm already starting to prepare for Thanksgiving, and so today was pie baking. So I won't be able to show you the final pie. I'll show you one from years previous that I've made using the same recipe, just measuring it out with a measuring cup. And I do think I recently showed that also in a video. And I will show you how the pie looks this year once I completely bake the pumpkin pie. So stay tuned because I still have to roll out. Here is the dough. I have it on a flouring mat and just a little bit of flour sprinkled. And here I have rolled it all out. Now you'll notice it's not in a complete circle, but it doesn't need to be. Then I just wind it up in my rolling pin and I place it inside the pie plate. I leave a pretty generous edge all around and then cut the excess off. And then I roll that out again and make some little imprints with leaf cutters and some freehand, and then I wrap the pie dough up really well in saran wrap and foil, little parchment paper, and stick it in a baggie. And I put the whole pie and the plate in the freezer. And this is a little
snowflake I made with the last bit of dough that was left over. And now you can see I do have a mess left for me to clean up because, yes, as I've said many times, I am a messy cook. And so I am going to have to get to it and put some groceries away and talk to you later.
Hello, everybody. Well, it is 9:30 Central Time, p.m. And I still have a little bit of cleaning up to do in the kitchen because just like I showed you and I've mentioned, I'm sort of a messy cook. But I have been extremely busy all day long, and my pie rolling was a little bit delayed just because of some of the other things I was doing. I did get my errands run. I did get to the grocery store, and I was able to pretty much pick up the majority of everything that happened to be on my list. And yes, guys, I am a list maker, and I just, from year to year, I will keep notes. Last year, I kept these notes as to what I fixed and my supplies and the days that I, cooked this or that, which is really helpful. I am currently sauteing my celery and onions and seasoning mix for my stuffing, because what I like to do is prepare that ahead of time, stick it in a Ziploc baggie, and freeze it until I'm ready to put all of my dressing together. Sorry, I have something in my throat. So I got that done, and then once I got home, I had to put all my groceries away, and then I did do my pie rolling, and I took pictures along the way, but I did not have all the equipment at that time set up again, and it was getting late, so I went ahead and took pictures. So let me explain to you what I did. I rolled out the dough that I made second, and that was the dough that I weighed the flour on a food scale. And I have to tell you, it was beautiful to roll out. Beautiful. There was no tearing. It rolled out so nice. And as I'll insert a picture here showing you just as I started. It was very simple. It was easy. It was not dry. It wasn't over processed. It just rolled out so nice. And so then the technique that I use is I roll up the actual dough on the rolling pin, and then I place it over the pie plate. Formed it, crimped it the way I wanted it, and then I even made little cutouts, little leaves, and I made a couple of bigger leaves. And what I did was I went ahead and baked those in the oven so that I can just put them on top of the pie after the pie has baked. And they puffed up, they were crispy, they had a nice light caramelization to them, and the little decos. And I sampled one of the little tiny leaves, and it was just flaky, light, almost very reminded me really of like almost a French pastry that's really flaky. It was so good, and that particular recipe was so easy. So what I did was I measured out 130 grams of flour on the food scale, and that was equivalent to 1 cup. So I did not roll out the other dough that I had made, and that was the first one, and that's the one I actually used the measuring cup to measure it out, because I am going to use that particular pie crust for Christmas, and it freezes so nice. So you can make those ahead of time and just form them into discs, and then I wrap it in saran wrap. Sometimes I'll put a piece of parchment paper around it, and then some saran wrap, and then foil, and then into a Ziploc freezer bag. And so I went ahead and froze it, because I think with the desserts that I am going to have, that I'm just going to do one pumpkin pie, and not my traditional pecan pie, but that's subject to change, and I could change my mind. But if I do, then I already have the pie dough already made. And what I do on the day that I'm going to use it is I take it out and I just let it thaw. Just naturally thaw out, and then I can roll it out and put it in the pie dish, and I probably would end up making a pecan pie, because some of us like that too. But it just depends, because this particular year I have just decided I am not going to overdo it. I am just going to keep in mind that we don't eat 5 cups of mashed potatoes or 3 cups of stuffing. And every time I look at the pan, I always think, oh, it's not enough. But I'm scaling back, and I am making just that much less this year, so that there's just not waste. And so anyways, I was really happy with how well the pie dough rolled out, how flaky that it baked. And the problem that I have sometimes is because it's just like the weight of the butter and the flour mixed together. Sometimes it tends to want to shrink down. It will puff up the pastry, but it moves and shrinks. And these did puff up. And like I said, they were so flaky and buttery, and they were just delicious. So the pie dough is formed in a glass Pyrex pie bowl. It's okay to keep it in the freezer. I have it very securely wrapped, and I always keep an eye on it in the freezer and put it in a special area so that nobody else goes in and throws something on top of it, because that would destroy my pie crust. And the reason that I don't freeze a pumpkin pie, because if you do, it pulls away from the crust. And I did that several years ago when we were having a lot of people for Thanksgiving, and I was making quite a few pies. I thought, oh, you know what? I'll freeze a couple of pumpkin pies and a couple of pecan pies, and then whatever else we're going to have for dessert. And those pumpkin pies that were so beautiful when they went in the freezer, and when they thawed out, they pulled away from the crust and didn't look so nice. So I don't do that anymore. I just freeze the pie crust. Now, I will be making my pumpkin pie on probably Wednesday, because I just want it really fresh. So I will be taking out the crust probably Tuesday night, slipping it into the refrigerator. Another thing that I do is I make my turkey ahead of time. And don't go, what? How crazy is that? Oh my gosh, it's not. One year when we were having a big surprise party for my husband's birthday, all the relatives were coming in to surprise him for his birthday and to spend Thanksgiving with us. Oh my gosh, was that a lot of work? Yes. And I was worried, how am I going to feed all these people? I have one oven. I mean, how am I going to utilize and get everything in it? So one of the girls I worked with, she said, you've got to do what my mother does every year. We have this grandiose celebration, and my mom makes her turkeys ahead of time. I go, what do you mean? She goes, she makes them like the weekend before or even 2 weeks before, because she does so much cooking. And I was like, How does that work? She says, well, she cooks the turkey and she does her dressing separate, which I think a lot of people do now. They don't stuff the bird, even though I think that's the best stuffing. And she slices the turkey up after it's finished cooking and cools, and she would put the slices of turkey, so many per Ziploc freezer bag, and pour broth into the bag so that it just covered the meat. And she'd stack up the meat into these bags, put them in the freezer, and freeze them. And then on Thanksgiving, she used her big roasting pan, and she would just cut the bags, the Ziploc bags, away, and they would be frozen solid in a block of broth, and she would just steam them slowly into. And that is what I have done for the past 10 years. The past 10 years. And I'll do it again, because now you've cleaned up that carcass from the bird. The turkey is done. I make ahead my sweet potato casserole, my green bean casserole, everything's frozen. All I'm doing on Thanksgiving Day is heating everything up. And then I make my potatoes fresh. I just get them prepared the night before. So I've learned to do a lot of prepping way ahead of time. And, some people might squawk, but we like to see the turkey whole at the table, all dressed and beautiful. And, so you know what I did when somebody's complained about it? I took a picture. Hey, here's what the turkey looked like last year. Look at it, because it's coming to the table already cut up. And it's easy. It's great. It's wonderful. So, a couple of tips that I could suggest, and for those of you who have cooked for years and years and are always the turkey cookers, you know how important it is to work ahead. You know how important it is to take lots of notes and have detailed grocery shopping lists. I check everything off in my pantry so that I'm not wasting and buying duplicates. And then I check mark and highlight everything that I've gotten, and anything that's not check marked or highlighted means I still need to get. It was just a little too early, like for rolls. And I also do like a little schedule as the days, kind of get closer, like what do I need to do on Monday? What do I need to do on Tuesday? I'm fortunate and blessed enough that I'm home and I have the extra time to do all this. And so I started a little bit early, but this season is going to go really fast. I really thought I was going to have a little bit of baking done by now, but no, I do not. The only baking I did was a batch of homemade chocolate chip cookies that I made with my granddaughter last week, and I did freeze some of those, and no holiday cookies, and I'm going to see if I can do a little bit of baking after I get the house decorated, and it's just going to be a very short season. But I have enjoyed fall, and that's why I didn't want to put my Christmas stuff out yet, because since I'm having Thanksgiving here, I just wanted to leave it up. But I did put my tree up with my pumpkins, so it is late, guys. It's going on 10 o'clock. It's time for me to get in the shower. I have an early morning appointment at the eye doctor's tomorrow, and then a trip to the doctor's for my mom, and then a little bit of babysitting in the afternoon, and then my husband's coming into town and will be here. Oh, so nice. I've got a list of honeydews like as long as my arm, but I'm just glad he's coming home. I'm just glad. It's been a long stretch for us, so it'll be nice. And so I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope I can continue to share some of my holiday cooking with you. So until my next video, be kind, be humble, and age gracefully. Bye.